Okay, so last week we were working a little bit with cascading style sheets. We were taking our bingo table and using the cascading style sheets as a way to control some of the formatting of the table. But, as I said at the very beginning of our lesson on using tables, in a lot of HTML these days, people use a different kind of layout instead of a table layout. So today I'd like to combine a little bit about what we learned with the cascading style sheets and combine that more with the layout instead of just the control of the elements. So what we have here is a page, and you see that there's four major parts to the page. I've got my body, which you should be familiar with. It's colored yellow. And then I've got three sections. A header, which is gray. I've got a left side bar, which is red, and a right side bar, which is blue. So basically, I've created different containers that I can put the content in. And for this lesson, we're going to look at how to control those containers. So let's take a look at the HTML. Okay. So here's my code for the page, and a couple things you should be familiar with. I define my document type as HTML. I then open my HTML tag, I open my header tag, and then I open a style type, which is CSS. We did this last time. Okay, so it says style type equals text/CSS. And then I start defining the different parts of my style tags. So body, I'm only giving it one quality. I'm setting the background color to yellow. So if I look here, we'll see that this makes the body of the whole page yellow. Okay. If I went back to here, I could switch that to something like blue, or let's say purple, and you can see that the effect is that it changes the body of the page to purple. Again, I'm not doing this down here where I use the body tag. Instead, I'm defining it up here as the body. Now after that, after I define the body, I've got these different sections. We haven't used this format before. What I'm doing is I'm creating different classes. And you create a class by saying dot or a period, and then you name the class. The first thing that I created is something that you might not see if you look on this page. I call it the box. And basically the box is going to hold all my content. I'm going to put the smaller boxes, the top box, the left box, and the right box, inside this element that I'm calling the box. Let me talk about that for a second. If you see here, I give the box a width of 1000 px, 1000 pixels. Okay? What that means is that it's going to stretch from here to here 1000 pixels. Okay? So if the user will change the width of the box of their page, you see that the body is changing. The body is shrinking. The purple stuff around the box is shrinking. But the box itself right now isn't changing. Okay? Until I get right to here. Now, if you look at the bottom of my Explorer bar, my Chrome bar, you'll see that right when I start to shrink it more and more, it's fine with that, it's fine with that, and now it won't let me shrink anymore. It gives me the scroll bar at the bottom. Because what I've told it is, don't let this box from this edge to this edge shrink more than 1000 pixels. Okay? The reason why I pick 1000 is because I don't want my layout to change dependent on the way the user's browser is. So by having this 1000, and I can make that bigger. Okay, so if I take this box and make it 1200 pixels, what you'll see, if I go back to it, is that this is stretching further. And now, at this point, I start to get the scroll bar. So I think most users are using a browser that can handle 1000 pixels. If their screen is bigger, they can handle more of it, and they'll just get more purple or whatever my body background is. The second thing about this is margin, which is auto. So it says margin colon auto. And then remember, you have to put the semicolon at the end of each of these. Because at the end of this, what the margin auto does is it makes it centered. Okay. So if I put this on the side, it's going to have the same amount of margin on the left and the same amount of margin on the right. Okay. So this box, even though I don't see it, is important for me to define. I'm going to put this back to 1,000 pixels. Okay. The second part is that I've got this section called header. Again, I do dot header, which means I'm defining a class called header. Okay. Now, in this header, I can control things. It's kind of like before how you were controlling your TH or your TD, and now I'm defining something called dot header. I'm giving it a font size, 24 points. I'm giving the text a color, which is white. I'm giving the background a color, which is gray. And then I'm doing this thing called clear left. Because I do clear left, what it's going to do with this is it's going to move everything out of the way that would be to the left of this. Okay? We'll talk about that in a second, but it's basically going to push this, no matter what, all the way to start at the left side of my other box. Now again, I can change elements here. If I didn't want the font size to be 24, I can make the font size in that to be 40 point. Okay, and again, I'm going to save it. I'm going to go here, and you see that the pictures of the MMA class gets a lot bigger. Okay, it also shrunk because remember I resaved that back at 1,000. Okay, so again, it's just another style. In this case, I'm defining a box though, and everything else that's in the box. Okay. I'm defining a section that I call left, which you'll notice has a background color of red. I'll get to the float and the width in a second. And then I'm defining a box or a class called right, which you'll notice has a background color of blue. Okay, so those are my three boxes. Let's talk about these two for a second. My width and my other width. What we have here is we say that it should float to the left. Now that's different than clear to the left. What this box is going to do, my left box, is it's going to move all the way over to the left until it finds something else there. Okay? So because in my page down here, my left is the first thing on that row, it doesn't find anything there. And this is going to float all the way to the left until it finds something too. Okay, because this comes afterwards, my right box, it floats up to this red box and then stops right there. What the width does is it defines the width of the two objects. Okay, so what I have here is I have 381 and then 618. What that does is it's 999 pixels. And you want to leave a little bit of room because what happens is if these two add up to be bigger than the box, it's going to stack them instead of putting them side by side. I'll get to that in a second. Let me go down to my body, okay, or the bottom of my page. Okay, so what we have here is I start the body, and then the very first thing is I'm saying div. Now div is it's a section of the text. Okay, think of it as a little box of text. Okay? And then the class of div that I want to use first is box. So that tells my browser, make a div, make a little section, and use the properties up here in box, which means give it a width of 1,000 and give it a margin of auto. Okay? And then the next thing I do within this div is I put another div. Okay? You notice I don't close this div over here. In fact, the closing for this div is down here. So that right within that div, I start another div. This is called div header. Okay? So it says put a box inside this other box that has the properties of the class called header. So it says go up here and use these properties. And here I say the pictures of the MMA class. which means that it's going to write that with a font size of 40, a font color of white, a background color of gray, and it's going to clear everything out so that it gets right to the left of the div. Now, because this doesn't have a width, it's going to automatically pick up the width of the box. Watch what happens if I give my header a width. Okay, so if I say width, and I set that equal to 500, and then I'm going to use px for pixels, what we'll see here, what we'll see here is that it no longer stretches all the way across. Okay? If you look at here, you see that it stretches only 500 pixels. Okay? So by having that be nothing, it automatically uses all the space. Okay? Or I suppose I could put width of 1,000, but that's kind of redundant because that's what my box width is. Okay. And then I close that div, which means that this box opened using these properties, wrote some things, and then I close that box. Okay. Next, I have another div called left, and then I put some text in it. Okay, this is where our menu would go, the left side. And I pick 381 for that left. Okay, so it's going to use 381 pixels. It's going to float it to the left, and it's going to make the background color red. Okay, so this is where that menu is going to go. And if I kept typing, it would fill down. I don't really need to give it a height. It'll give it as much height as it needs. In fact, if I want to see that box bigger, okay, what I would do is I would just put, for now, a bunch of line breaks, BR, which is basically like in a word processor hitting return. Okay, so then if I save that, it will see that this red box, it's longer if I wanted to see more of that page. Okay, and then I close that div. So now my box called left is closed. I'm going to start another div, and this time I'm going to call it right. Okay? So it says use this, a float left and a width of 618. And then I type some things about the right. Okay, so, and then I end that div. And then finally, I can get rid of the PR. Finally, I end the big div of the box. Okay? And then at the very end, I end the body, and I end the HTML. And let me just show you a little bit about the float. Let's say I made my right. I'm going to make it smaller. Okay, so I'm going to turn this to 500 pixels. Okay. And as I go to save, you'll see now the blue box gets smaller. And if I change the float to the right, okay, instead of pushing up as far left as it can go, it's now going to push as far right as it can go. So you say hug the edge of something over to the right of the page. Okay, so you see that it's lining up with the right of the box, because that's the first place it found a line. Okay, so you can float to the left, you can float to the right. If I floated my box that's called left to the right, I know that's a little bit confusing. What we'll see is that now that box is going to float to the right of this box. Okay, because it comes first. Okay, so that box floats all the way to the right. And then this box, which comes second, floats to the right as far as it can go. Okay, I'm going to change those both back to left. But I'll give you a link if you want to learn more about the right and left float. It's a little bit confusing, especially since I'm calling the boxes right and left. Probably shouldn't do that. Okay, so I'm back to here. And let me make this box bigger. I think it was, what, 618. And then save. Okay, let me show you what happens if I make it too big. If I made it